The Illuminate Arts and Faith Conference in Chattanooga, Tennessee wants to help you find your tribe. Do you get way too excited about quoting Wendell Berry or C.S. Lewis in conversations with coworkers? Does your Spotify playlist include hymns, a little jazz, and a whole lot of Andrew Peterson? Join your tribe at Illuminate March 31 and April 1 for education and inspiration from speakers Russ Ramsey, Douglas McKelvey, John Hendricks, and others. Find a complete list of session topics and ticket information at southern.edu/illuminate.
In 2024, I set out to meet as many poets as I could and spend an hour with each one. I got more than I bargained for, more insight, more clarity, more hope. It's proved to be one of the richest highlights of my life. 17 writers, 17 deeply human conversations that made me sit up and pay attention. Franz Kafka once said, if the book we're reading doesn't wake us up with a blow to the head, what are we reading for? A book must be the axe for the frozen sea within us. And that's what I hope this new book will do. I hope it wakes us up, my friends. I hope these conversations will be the catalyst for something to be reawakened, re-enchanted, and reinvigorated. It's called An Axe for the Frozen Sea, Conversations with Poets About What Matters Most. I'm Ben Palpin, and I hope you'll come and listen in as I spend a little time with poets like Lucy Shaw, Malcolm Guite, Dana Gioia, and Lee Young Lee. Pull up a chair at the table as we dig into what it means to write well and to live well. An Axe for the Frozen Sea is now available from Rabbit Room Press. Visit the store at rabbitroom.com, or better yet, ask about it at your favorite bookseller.
By the time you're 40-something, you're walking into every room is just a collection of battle scars. Mm-hmm. And so we can spend all our energy trying to hide that, or you tell the story for laughs and you move on. You know, to some degree, those wounds have the power that you give them.
Welcome to the Habit Podcast, conversations with writers about writing. I'm Jonathan Rogers, your host. Andy Osenga is a singer-songwriter, a guitar hero, and the director of artists and repertoire at Integrity Music. Also, he hosts one of my favorite podcasts, The Pivot, stories of people who have made a change. And he's a great storyteller. I've heard it said that great stories happen to the people who can tell them. That's why I wanted to have Andy Osenga on the Habit Podcast. Andy Osenga, I'm really happy to have you here on this special series, Sad Stories Told for Laughs, on the Habit Podcast.
I'm excited to be here.
In some ways, I think
I feel like my whole life has led me to this moment.
Well, I was about to say, in some ways, your sort of stories of public humiliation are kind of your brand. No, that's not true. But it's definitely a part of. You just have some great stories of public chagrin. And I wanted the listeners of the Habit Podcast to be in on some of these. So you were not fresh out of high school, but not too far out of high school when you started the band The Normals.
Yeah. Oh, fresh out of high school.
High school.
We got signed February of my freshman year of college. Put a record out that summer.
Yeah. And you were called The Normals because you were from Normal, Illinois.
Same thing, but Illinois, technically. Think of the most boring town name for a Midwestern corn state, and it's fine.
Normal, Illinois. And we have to talk about the team name for your high school, the Iron Men.
You've taken notes, bro. Yeah. So our high school mascot was the Iron Men, and the girls' mascot was the Lady Iron Men.
Do you know if that's still the case? Have they changed?
I hope so. It's too good. But what's best is like that never hit me until like I was 30. And it just one day went, oh my gosh, the Lady Men. This is amazing.
It's speaking of normal, it's amazing what you accept as normal. Right?
Isn't it though?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're all boiling frogs, aren't we?
Yeah, that's right. Well, so you made a so you left home to go to college, and then you signed up. Then the Normals.
Yeah.
Got a record deal.
Yeah.
And you made a triumphant return to Normal, Illinois.
we made
Why don't you tell us about that? You are now queued up to tell about.
Yeah, this is not by no means the most embarrassing story, but it was it sort of ushered me into the next generation. Like I have a bunch of embarrassing stories from my childhood.
Yeah.
Even like at my church, in my youth group, I was always the kid that this stuff happened to, and then I moved away, got a record deal. Yeah, things are going to change. I came back to my hometown. It was the first tour I was ever on, and we were the opening band for the opening band. There were 3 bands on this tour. We were the very first. We played, 4 or 5 songs. And to be honest, that was a stretch for our ability.
Wait, you played how many songs?
I think 5. I think we played 5. Poorly. We played them all poorly. And then because we were the hometown band, some people in my town, including my parents, pooled together to promote a concert in my hometown. They booked a big room. It's the same room that Springsteen had done his acoustic tour in the year before. Mm-hmm. Of course, it was not sold out when we were there. Yeah. But it was, there were people, a bunch of people, a lot of people I went to high school with. Because it was our hometown show, they swapped us that one night, and we went in the middle. So there was a band, the band that, the middle band was opening for us, which was awesome. And their lead singer that night, he got a water bottle, and he ran out to try to be really cool to the audience and like throw water on it. Whoa, whatever. And but the stage was really deep, and he didn't get far enough, and so he just got water all over the front of the stage. And so we got out there. And I got feeling pretty excited about all these kids I went to high school with and my parents' friends and whatever. I was like, yeah, I'm a rock star. So I tried to go out kind of in front of the whole band too and like be cool. And there's one little lick. There's one, like now I would consider myself like, I'm a pretty decent guitar player. I can play licks, but back then I knew one, and I had practiced it a lot, and I could barely hit it most nights. So I was like, I'm going to go out in front of the audience, or way in front of the band, and play my lick. And so I did, and then I slipped on the water that the guy had just left all over the front of the stage, and just legs up. But just hit it hard in front of everybody. That was my triumphant return home. It was not awesome. And my parents probably also lost money on that to watch their son make a fool of himself.
But I remember some fireworks. Wasn't there a fireworks?
Yeah,
problem that same show? Or
that was a different show, but it was nearby. Every time
in my imagination, it was all one big catastrophe.
No, I think we played in my home. Like near my hometown 2 or 3 times. Prophet is without honor in his hometown.
Yeah, right.
The closer we would get, the worse our shows were always. And our guitar player, who now like runs a production company, owns tons of lights and speakers, and he's always into that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And he wanted us to have pyrotechnics in our show, which was not the kind of band that we were. And nor did he have a pyrotechnics license or any training. But what he did have is he lived in Tennessee, where you could just buy fireworks. So he rigged up this whole. He is brilliant. And so he rigged up this whole system with where he pulled the fuses out of fireworks and put bottle rocket launchers in there, like model rocket launchers, and then rigged those up to this pedal board situation. So he had one pedal board for his guitar and another one for these pyrotechnics that he had. I mean, could you imagine anything less legal? And he actually did this on one tour. He got hired to do that for one of the other bands on the tour without a license every night. One night he did light a girl's hair on fire in the front row. But I was using a straight like microphone stand. I was the lead singer of this band. I was right in the middle, and he had, unbeknownst to us, set all these pyrotechnics all around the stage, but didn't tell anybody. It was just not brilliant. So like some big moment in a song, some big top of the chorus or something. All of a sudden I'm singing and there's just this wall of flame in front of my face. I mean, like 6 inches in front of my face. And I just screamed, like not rock and roll scream, like screamed in terror into the microphone. And it took me 2 seconds and then just this death glare at my friend. Like, what are you doing? He just thought it was so cool. I just looked over and he was just like, feeling it. Because he knew it was coming. Yeah. So there was that. I
want to return to this idea that you mentioned, the prophet has no honor in his own hometown. Yeah. That seems...
That's an Osenga original right there.
What's that?
It's an original.
Yeah, right. Yeah, good job. Wow. That seems relevant to our topic. I mean, for a performer, for an artist, so many of these stories, these sad stories told for laughs, are about that contrast between who you are as an artist, as a performer on the one hand, and who you are as a person.
Yeah.
And the people who, and there's this conflict, or not. I mean, I don't know if conflict is the right word, but it's two different things. It is two different things, right? Even I don't care who you are. Mm-hmm. Your public persona, even if your public persona is to be a really down to earth guy, it's still different from who you are.
Yeah.
And so you're a little bit like a guy in a tuxedo.
Thing, like in our circle of friends, like we have friends who are who mean a lot to people, who mean a lot to strangers.
Yeah.
And you hear people talking about your friends in a way you go, that's not the person I know. I know that guy. Whoever you're thinking of, it's not him. I'm glad that you have this person in your mind to inspire you, but I don't recognize them. Yeah. No, it's so true. Well, I think that's like the, I think that's the effect, right? The effect of these two different people is that like you're seen as one when you know that you're another, you feel like another. But I wonder, and I know personally for me, like there's also a cause, which is that I feel like one thing, and yet I continue to present myself in another, or things happen to me, or what you're trying to fight against it as a kid. You're trying to figure out who you are and communicate to the world. No, who you think I am is not who I am. Huh. And that puts you on a path to have this kind of career where then you end up wrestling with that the whole time.
Are you saying that's something that it's inevitable?
I don't. I imagine I imagine there are some kids you could see and you could look at it and go, it's probably inevitable for that kid.
Yeah.
They're gonna have a career trying to figure out how to express themselves like that. Like they're fighting to figure out who they are and for you to know who they are.
Huh.
Maybe. I don't know.
So that idea of you trying to express who you are, I mean, you've been doing this a long time.
Yeah.
You're deep in your 40s.
I'm not deep.
Okay. All right.
I'm in them.
Okay. You're sorry. I thought you were, maybe I thought you were older.
Give me 2
I don't know how old you are. But Anyway, that's not the point.
Didn't know that was a hot button, by the way, until you hit it.
You're in your 40s, okay?
Yeah.
Are you this idea of trying to make sure people know who you are?
Yeah. Okay. Let me tell you another sad story for laughs.
Okay.
From when I was a kid, and you can learn a lot about me from this story.
Okay.
So I was a nerdy kid. Like I was into Legos and Star Trek. I did not really know how to. I was not a great social animal.
Okay.
This was probably, I think this was in 8th grade. It was in 8th grade. And in 8th grade at like school, I barely existed. I was very quiet. I didn't really have many friends. And just kind of like, back row, stay out of trouble. But at church, there was a youth group, and I was I was pretty vocal, and I had some friendships. Mm-hmm. And but I was always desperately trying to be cool and failing. And there one morning at Sunday, so they would have Sunday school at like 9, and then you go to big church at 10:30. Somebody had a little Tony the Tiger suction cup that had been in their cereal that morning, and they were taking turns just like sticking it on their foreheads and being stupid. I was like, "Oh, let me try it," and I put it on, and I kept it on longer than anybody else. What I didn't realize is that was going to give me essentially a bright purple, completely spherical hickey in the middle of my forehead, like 3-inch circle.
Yeah.
And, which, you can't wash off. I remember going to the bathroom trying to wash it off and it was not washing off. I didn't know what was happening. This poor kid got a buzz cut. There's no hiding. And my, it was so ingrained in that culture. Like you don't ever leave church. Nothing will make you leave church. So I remember my people snickering at me and me sitting in the front of in the church there. And like my mom was in the choir, just sitting there crying at everyone, laughing at her son, but we didn't leave. We sat through the whole thing. And then she bought me makeup, like cover stick that you put over a pimple to try to cover it up. But just to cover it up, it was so bright. To cover it up, it looked like I had, Play-Doh or, silly putty on my forehead. This is like a Klingon. Not because Star Trek reference. And, it was just like, it was this torturous, I was 14, like the worst time ever for like the nerdy kid to do something stupid like that. Like if I go back to Illinois right now, if I go back to that church, like someone will bring it up now. Wow. I'm 42 years old. Someone will bring up that dumb thing I did when I was 14. And there's probably an element of what I got into that was pushing back on, no, that's not who I am.
Wow.
Yeah. Listen to my songs. I am not just this kid that stupid things keep happening to. And that was one of 80 of those things. Yeah. Now, of course, what's hilarious is my music career has been pretty much the exact same. Like I'm still a guy that trips and falls. I have 9 toes, like, that kind of is who I am. It's not only who I am,
Well, yeah. Okay. So what do we make of, I feel like there's some, I think there's some, it feels significant to me that you're a person with 9 toes and yet you wear flip-flops.
I can't wear flip-flops because they don't stay on, but I wear slides or chacos.
Okay. So I guess, so, okay. That
I'm not going to hide it.
That was insensitive of me to say you wore flip-flops.
No, it's just hilarious because I can't grip.
Yeah. Okay. And so, you don't keep your toes covered. Always, right? And that feels like that's a metaphor for something.
Sure. Yeah. First of all, Andy Golohorn wrote a song about it and put it on a record, so it doesn't matter. Everybody already knows.
Yeah, right.
I remember a high school girlfriend found me on Facebook years later. It's like, hey, I went to this concert and somebody sang a song. I think it was about you. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, what's the point of? I mean, that's the thing, like that stuff happens to all of us, right? Like,
well,
and we all, whether it's like a physical thing, like we're missing a toe, or it's an emotional thing, like we're all, by the time you're 40 something, you're walking into every room is just a collection of battle scars. And so we can spend all our energy trying to hide that, or, you tell the story for laughs and you move on, I mean, if you can, some are deep wounds that are not ever going to be that, this is not that, this is silly,
Yeah.
But I think, to some degree, those wounds have the power that you give them. Probably to all degree, but often we don't. Often the work is figuring out the power that we've given them and then trying to reclaim it.
Yeah.
And a silly thing like that is like, yeah, I mean, if I was probably middle school me would have hit it for sure. But me now doesn't care.
Yeah, right.
And now it's funny. Like I forget about it. I was at a thing that thing we were talking about in Texas last week, and there's some people that I work with that like I see every day who saw me in sandals like, dude, what happened to your foot? I'm like, oh yeah, I thought you knew this. I thought everybody knew this. Anyway.
It was I guess we should say it was a lawnmower accident.
Oh, it was a lawnmower accident. 16 years ago. 16 and a couple weeks ago.
Okay.
I was listening to a Randall Good Game song in my backyard, and I slipped under the mower. The song was "A Pope Was a Lady," and which is still a great song. And then Andy Golohorn wrote a song about it. Then he learned that he had the wrong toe, so he wrote a different song about it, and that one's on a record, and that song is called "Roast Beef."
Yeah. One of the sort of categories of sad stories told by performers that I've noticed is the shady promoter story.
Oh yes.
And I know you've got at least one doozy.
Oh, I've got a few doozies. I've got a couple of promoters who walked around all day crying.
A couple of promoters who walked.
Yeah, that was tough.
So that wasn't shady promoters. That was just unsuccessful promoters.
Unsuccessful promoters. My previously referenced parents might have been those. We played this when I was with Caveman's Call. We played this festival in, I think it was South Carolina. That it was a couple, like at the time I would say we were sort of a B level act. We sort of were past the prime of the band's days.
Okay.
And, but could get an audience. And
so you weren't on your way up, you're on your way down at this point.
Sure. But that was my whole career with that band. The long fall back there. And it was us and Point of Grace and Big Daddy Weave. I think it was the three bands. And there were a couple local bands. And it was nice. It was a big stage. They had all the amps and drums that we'd requested. Tons of vendors, food trucks, and a big crew of like volunteers who were helping out, who were from like a local church. And we were all like, man, this day is going to be awesome.
Yeah.
And every band had their own, like we were there in tour buses, but they also had like little Winnebago trailers for everybody, like super nice. Like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. First annual. And they open the gates and not one person shows up. When I say not one person, I'm not exaggerating. Like not one actual person showed up.
So there are volunteers.
I mean, there's hundreds of people there who were working at the event. Maybe 100 people who were there, and not one single attendee.
Nobody had bought a ticket.
Nobody bought a ticket. Not sure if tickets were even sold. They definitely had not been marketed. And there started to be this sort of hubbub around like, what is happening? And it turns out that it was some sort of money laundering scheme. I've never had the kind of money that you needed to launder, so I don't know really how this works. All I know is that somebody needed to lose a lot of money, and this was how they were going to do it.
Amazing.
And, but it didn't need to be successful. It just had to happen.
Wow.
And so, I mean, that's a lot of work they put into this.
It's amazing that you
could have just gotten a
that
real
many
job,
people in your
man.
money laundering scheme.
Yeah, like you did a good job. Like I've had people who tried really hard to do this well that did a much worse job than you wanting to fail. But contractually, everybody had to play like a minimum of 45 minutes or something. So we just like stood out in this empty field, like 12 of us, and watched the other bands, like took turns. and then we had to go get paid. We still needed to get paid.
Oh yeah.
And and that was the deal. Like for us to get paid, we needed to play. So we did play to no one. And or I should say, we played to Point of Grace. and and a couple of random volunteers. And then so our road manager, who is now a worship pastor, Kevin Mann,
Okay.
was our road manager at the time. And he went into this trailer to get our money, to get the check. And he walks in, and there's a guy sitting there that he has not seen all day, suit and tie, sitting at the little table in a little Winnebago. There's a stack of cash and a pistol on the table. And the guy goes, we don't have enough money to cover your whole contract, but we think, will this do? And, the answer is, yes, sir, that will be fine. Thank you. So Kevin sheepishly takes, a half of the money that we were supposed to get paid. It's like, guys, we got to get out of here right now. But there were big fences around this whole place that were deadbolt locked, big chains, and we couldn't get out. And we're like, what on earth? Like, we literally locked us in, and we're not sure whatever the thing was that they needed us to do. We were out. We were done. So we were going to get out of there, and we couldn't get out. And the way that usually bands they like lease a bus. It's like you rent a car at an airport. Like there are companies that own buses, and they have drivers on staff, and you rent the buses for a few days. Unless you're a band that is touring a whole lot and it makes the right investment to buy a bus. We never owned a bus. Neither did Point of Grace. Big Daddy Weave owned their own bus, which is really helpful because they were also like, dude, we got to get out of here. And one of their guys was like, all right, everybody follow us. And so the buses lined up, and Big Daddy Weave's bus just rammed that gate. I mean, some old 70s like movie just like took it out. And then all these buses just tore out of there afterwards. And like, that was it. That was the thing.
Wow.
Never heard from anybody again. We did not play that festival again the next year.
You didn't. You missed it the next year.
I don't know that there was a second annual. So that was what. Now, I do have another story I feel like I need to tell you.
Okay.
Have I told you about the time I ran monitors?
No. You ran monitors?
Okay, yeah. So
I don't know what that means.
Okay, so when you go see a band play, they're the speakers that are pointed towards the audience.
Okay.
There's the sound guy, the front of house guy.
Okay.
Which for almost every band I've ever been with has been Harold Rubens.
Uh-huh.
He was our front of house guy when I played with Steve and Chris Chapman. He does the Christmas tour with Andrew, and he was Caedmon's guy.
Okay.
So we've done hundreds of shows together. And then you have the monitor person who's running either the in-ear mixes for the artist, or like if the artist has monitors on the stage, like small speakers that are pointed up towards them.
Mm-hmm.
And typically, every person in the band is going to have their own mix. So the monitor person is the mixes don't have to be near as nice, but they're doing 5, 6, 8, 10 different mixes.
Okay.
Whereas the front of house person's just got one. It's just what you hear in the audience. Okay. So I played with this band named Caveman's Call for like 7 years, but a couple weeks before I joined the band, I guitar teched for them. I needed some cash. They needed a guitar tech. I was going to take over afterwards. So just come out and do this, and you can kind of, we'll kind of rehearse while you're out here. So, great. I'd been married, I think, 2 or 3 weeks. So they were like, bring Allison. She can come too. So we hopped on a bus, and I was a very bad guitar tech. But
guitar tech's job is to keep the guitars tuned.
Guitars in tune and bring them out at the right time. That means you have to pay attention, which has never been my great.
It's your strong point.
Yeah. So anyway, we were playing it. It was the Stone Mountain Amphitheater in Stone Mountain, Georgia. It's about 4,000 or 5,000 seater amphitheater. Beautiful place. And I think we were the second band to the. So I think there was maybe one band. I think Third Day was playing after us, and then, but it was a whole all-day festival, and it was right before soundboards now are digital, and you can save things and recall them, and take your little hard drive to the next console, and it'll pull it up just what you had at the other one. But back in this time, this was probably 2002. We went in 2002. They were still analog boards. And so all the bands would sound check first thing in the morning. And then all the opening bands would play, local bands would play during the day. And then the headliners would start late afternoon. And each of them had their own console on the side of the stage for monitors. And they were these analog things. And so we had done that. We had rehearsed, we had sound checked. At the time, the band had 7 people in it, and our singer had fallen and broken his wrist, and he couldn't play guitar. So Randall Goodgame, who was actually opening at the time, was playing guitar, filling in. So there were 8 people in the band.
Okay.
And and each person had 2 big speakers on the floor. So they each had these 2 giant speakers, and then there were 2 giant speakers on the side of the stage too, called side fills. So there were 9 different mixes. There were 18 giant speakers on the stage. And, but that day so we always had a front of house guy and a monitor guy that were great. And we trusted him and knew him well. That day was Harold's daughter's birthday. And so he took the day off to go to Houston for his daughter's birthday. And so our monitor guy ran front of house. And then a truck driver who worked at a sound company was like, we're going to pay him a little bit of money to run monitors for us. Great. And he was good. Sounded great. What you do after you do those sound checks, you put these big pieces of tape across the board that say, don't touch this. This is set up. But somebody had come along and zeroed out the board, taken every knob back to 0. Like, it must have thought it had been used already. And so it erased all the work that they'd done. And so that sub monitor guy walks up, looks at it, and goes, nope. And got in the truck and left. Which is the truck, by the way, that all our gear needs to go into later that night. He just left. And we found this out about 10 minutes before we're supposed to go on stage. And the band looks at me like, guess you're our monitor guy. And now I could probably do this because I've been in studios and I know how that stuff works. But at the time, I had not been trained on any of that. I had no idea. I could barely play guitar. And but it's set up like a grid. There's sort of like, here's all these different speakers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And there's knobs, and here's all the instruments. So the sets of speakers are on the left. All the different instruments and microphones are at the bottom, and it's a grid. And so people want more of this, and you kind of find their knob and you turn it up. And there's there's a lot, and there's a bunch of knobs that I don't know what they do.
Yeah.
And so it sounds terrible, but they have to go on. There's 5,000 people out there. And so we get it basically enough everybody can hear like the lead singer and the bass guitar or something, enough they can sort of play, but it's not sounding good. So the whole time I'm trying to tune guitars and run them out there. people are doing that little dance where they're pointing at their instrument and waving their fingers around, and I'm going, I'm trying to figure it out. And I'm, throwing guitars at my wife and yelling at her. We've been married for 3 weeks. Run this out to clip, or whatever. And so anyway, we're 5 or 6 songs into it. It's finally going. It's like leveled out. It's okay. It's not sounding great, but it's fine. The band's able to perform. And then Derek Webb, who was the guitar player at the time, had set down an acoustic guitar, and he had a little pedal that mutes it, but he forgot to mute it. So it started feeding back. So I have a button that's mute. So I muted it, and problem solved. He plays a couple songs on the electric guitar. Then he goes back to the acoustic guitar and picks it up, and he can't hear it. Nobody can hear it. Everybody's doing the dance, the wave. Hey, and more acoustic guitar. So I turn it up, and there's a little knob at the very top. It says gain. I turn that one up. There's a fader. I still don't know what the fader does. I literally turn every single knob on 10. I mean, the whole thing. And again, there's 18 giant speakers on the stage.
Oh, no.
And everything probably should have been at 2. Yeah. And then I realized, it's muted. So I unmute it. And I know this has been a long story, but at that moment, that's the loudest noise I've ever heard in my life. Just this, it just roars. And there are 8 people on stage. 4 of them immediately fall over. The music just stops. It's just dead on. And I, find it again and mute it. But the band is just laying on the ground. The audience has no idea what's happening. And then the lead singer all of a sudden starts going, I can't hear. And he runs off the stage holding his head. They call an ambulance because his hearing did not come back.
Really?
It ended up coming back later that night, but it took like a couple hours. And that was the end of their set. Like, to the audience, the band sucks. The band gets a little better. They're playing along. All of a sudden, everyone falls over and a guy yells out screaming. Like, that was the end of the night. Ladies and gentlemen, third day. So anyway, that's what happened the one time I ran monitors. It's pretty awesome.
That's amazing. I've never heard that story.
Yeah, it's a pretty great story.
Yeah. Okay, your favorite thing that I've ever known you to do is the Leonard the Lonely Astronaut record. Right. I mean, I just still think it's just one of my favorite things of all time. And so, that's been a while. That was, I guess, 2011. It came out at the same time my Flannery O'Connor book came out. I know that those came out the same month. It would have been 2012 when that record came out. Okay.
Yeah. I made it in 11.
That sounds right. Yeah. Okay. And so you built you recorded it in a studio that looked like a spaceship.
Yep.
And then our friend Kim made you a spacesuit.
Yes,
and you wore the spacesuit while you recorded this concept album about an astronaut named Leonard.
Mm-hmm.
So you were the lonely, it was this sort of strange performance art that nobody was there to even see you do, right? Because you were just kind of...
Yeah, it was about 3 years before Instagram could have been helpful in communicating that story.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then when you went out and toured that show, that album, you wore the...
I did. I wore the spacesuit.
The spacesuit. Yeah.
And brought some pieces of the spacesuit or spaceship to put up on stage. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Which is really putting yourself out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And sometimes people came to the shows or usually people came to the shows, and sometimes not very many people came to the shows.
Yeah, there were some good ones. There were some not so good ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've often thought about that. And I thought about you sort of first, I mean, the songs themselves, I felt like there was a lot of Andy Osenga in them, right? I mean,
yeah,
all your songs, but it felt like just the songs themselves felt a little bit vulnerable.
Yeah. It was an extremely personal record.
Yeah.
And I think the act of the character, however effective the communication of that was, it allowed for some distance to say, all right, it gave some space to like, I can go into this stuff if it's not me singing about my family or my friends, but it's this guy singing about, if I can change enough details to so that the names have been changed to protect the innocent kind of thing.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And just the thought of you putting on a spacesuit for crying. And I know you're nerdier than me, for instance. And so, it may not be quite as odd for you to put on a spacesuit as say me or
as the years have gone, it has sounded stranger and stranger that I did that.
But I love the way you put yourself out there. And then I think about those nights. I don't know if there were a lot of nights, but I know there's at least one or two nights where it just really was a poorly attended show.
Yeah. Well, it didn't. So right after we made that record, our home flooded, and we lost just about everything we owned, and we were living in this tiny rental condo that our insurance company was paying for, and the months of marketing I would have done, like I made the record and was able to devote myself to it, and then there were these months that I needed to market the shows. Yeah. Then I was an independent artist at the time, and I was doing all that, and I just couldn't do it. I didn't have the headspace, taking care of the home and a brand new baby. And so I was just like sort of crossing my fingers that someone in the town had told somebody else that we were going to play a show. And some places they did, and they were great. And then there were places like Cincinnati where, there were 5 of us on stage and 9 people out there. It was a little like the Point of Grace thing, but it wasn't as great of a story. Yeah. Yeah, it was just an actual lonely man in a spacesuit.
But one of the I think a fascinating dynamic for a performer like you is that you are called upon to put it all out there.
Yeah,
and if you don't put it all out there, it's not going to work at all.
Yeah.
And yet you put it all out there with no guarantee that it's going to be received, right? The people who are in the audience, it's a very different dynamic, right? I mean, they're there for a show. They're there to be entertained. They're for
it asks of the audience $15 in 2 hours. It asks of the artist sort of bring your entire life and skill into these few moments and be wholly present with us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you for doing that. It was as you were on that tour wearing your spacesuit, I think that's when it really came home to me what it costs people like you, the performer. We think of the performer as being the rock star hero, but it really is costly. And I don't know what else to say about that. I mean, that may be the end of my observation. But it was, for whatever reason, it was you doing that tour is where it really, the pathos of your situation really came home to me, and what y'all, people like you, are doing for the rest of us, giving us something we can't get for ourselves.
Oh man, that's cool of you to say that, and I mean, I recognize that in artists that I love, and that when you go to see a concert or something, and you can tell immediately when the artist is present, and is engaged, and when they're not. And man, doesn't matter how great your seats are, if that artist is not able to be there that night, emotionally or whatever, in whatever it is, stand-up comedy, music, whatever, like, acting, like it just, there's nothing. And, for better or worse, I don't have it. My gear shifter tends to be stuck in give it all, baby. Probably there were times when it would have been wise to not do so. But also I think that, at least you can look back and you go, man, I didn't tell any lies,
Yeah. Yeah.
You can
Well,
stand by
that
the
gap
work.
between what the performer's investing and what the audience is investing, and that gap between the persona of the performer and the person who is the performer.
Yeah.
Those gaps are kind of where all these stories in this series live,
Yeah. For sure. Right. That's where the wall, the wall gets a little thin.
Yeah, right.
And they see through. Yeah.
Well,
okay. Last story I'll tell you is super quick. But have I ever told you about this one? When there was a season when I was in Caedmon's, when my wife was pregnant, and two of the other wives in the band were pregnant. One of them was in the band, and so we did this tour where he had 3 pregnant women on a tour bus.
Okay.
And Cliff and I would talk about this at length some evenings on stage. And we were playing at this big Baptist church in Texas. And I don't know now what I was trying to say or how I was trying to phrase it, but what came out of my mouth was, "Ladies, don't get too close to this band or we will get you pregnant."
Oh, no.
Again,
yeah,
not what I meant to say. Not how I meant to communicate.
Right. Usually people say something like there's something in the water or something.
That's what I was trying to say.
Yeah.
But that's not how I said it.
Well, on that note, Andy, we're kind of out of time.
I don't know if that helps your point, but it's just a good story. I had to make sure you knew.
I've never heard that one. All right, Andy Osenga. We better wrap it up there.
Jonathan, thank you.
I know we have only scratched the surface on your stories of public embarrassment, but we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks for being here.
You're the best, dude. Talk to you soon.
This podcast is brought to you by The Rabbit Room, where art nourishes community and community nourishes art. And all our podcasts are made possible by the generous support of our members. To learn more about us, visit rabbitroom.com, and to become a member, rabbitroom.com/donate. Special thanks as well to Taylor Linhart for letting us use her song Diamonds as the theme music for Season 3 of the Habit podcast. You can learn more about Taylor and follow her work at taylorlinhart.com.
The Habit membership is a library of resources for writers by me, Jonathan Rogers. More importantly, The Habit is a hub of community where like-minded writers gather to discuss their work and give each other a little more courage. Find out more at thehabit.co.
If you've enjoyed this podcast episode, consider joining the Rabbit Room membership. Your membership helps sustain this community, funding everything from publishing and podcasts and theater productions to events and programs that support artists who create with a Christ-centered vision. We'd love to have you on board. Learn more at rabbitroom.com/member.